Let's discuss growing small fruit in Kansas. We won't cover all the small fruit as possible to grow in Kansas, but focus on strawberries, brambles, and grapes. Adding organic matter is always a good idea with small fruit. Try to cover the entire row with about 2 inches of organic matter and work it into the soil. Though you can use a spading fork as shown here, it is much easier to use a rototiller. Be careful not to over-till the soil so the structure of the soil is destroyed. Till enough to mix in the organic matter, but not so much that the soil looks like flour. This lesson will focus on strawberries. Strawberries are one of the easiest crops to grow, but understanding how they grow can help us harvest much more fruit. Strawberries are self-pollinating, so only need one variety. Do you remember when fruit buds form? We mentioned it in a previous lesson. It is in the fall. Think September and October. Our June-bearing strawberries are short-day plants, and so fruit buds form in response to the shortening days in the fall. The care you give strawberries in the fall through fertilization, timely watering, and weed control can help increase the harvest the next spring. This is a trick question. How many fruit do you see here? Actually, what looks like seed on the outside of the strawberry are actually individual fruits. Each of these fruits contains a single seed. The red stuff is actually a modified flower part, specifically an enlarged fleshy receptacle. You could also call this an aggregate fruit. An aggregate fruit is a single fruit made up of many single fruits. So you could say this is one fruit and still be correct. Strawberries bear fruit in a cluster in a specific pattern. Let's see how this works. The first strawberry to ripen in a cluster is called the primary or king berry. It is also the largest berry in a cluster. 2 secondary berries ripen next. You can see them in the illustration on the ends of the side branches. They are smaller, but still good size. Following the secondary berries are the tertiary berries. There are 4 tertiary berries that ripen at the same time. They are born behind the secondary berries. Sometimes you also get some quaternary berries that appear last. They are so small they are often not marketable. So you go from 1 berry to 2 berries to 4 berries, and if you had a full set of quaternary berries, there would be 8 additional ones. So this is what this looks like in real life. The primary fruit is already developing. There are 2 secondary buds also that are in full bloom. Here you see the 4 tertiary buds that haven't started to open yet. If you look closely, you can also see a couple of quaternary buds. So again, this fruit cluster of a strawberry starts with 1 primary fruit that ripens first, followed by 2 secondary fruit, followed by 4 tertiary fruit. There may also be some quaternary fruit, but they will likely be of poor quality. Though strawberries may live for a number of years, they will often produce best for a limited number of years. The reason strawberries produce fewer berries as the planting ages is due to several factors, including the buildup of weeds and disease. It is especially important to control weeds when the planting is young, as the plants have not had enough time to canopy over. To canopy over means the plants are close enough together that the plants shade the soil, reducing the likelihood of weed seed germinating. This photo shows a strawberry planting that was decimated by disease. More commonly, disease cuts down on the vigor of the plants and yield, but doesn't kill the plants. Therefore, you may have a planting that lives for a number of years, but doesn't produce as much after about 3 to 4 years. Therefore, if you want maximum production, replant every 3 to 4 years. Let's look at establishment. We mentioned earlier that strawberries tend to pick up diseases over time. Therefore, it is important to start with clean plants. Choose disease-free, virus-indexed plants. The company you buy from should be able to tell you whether they are virus-indexed or not. Strawberries normally come in groups of 25. Strawberries are normally planted with 18 to 24 inches between plants. Therefore, you need 38 to 50 feet of row for a full set of strawberries. So which varieties work well in Kansas? These are all good varieties for Kansas. There are others as well, but this gives you a good starting point. You may also want to talk to other gardeners and garden centers to see what they recommend. Notice that you can stretch the growing season by growing early to mid-late varieties. I have grown Early Glow, Honey Oi, Jewel, and Sparkle. All have done well for me. Strawberries are sensitive to planting depth. Plant too deep and the plant suffocates and dies, or plant too shallow and the roots are exposed and the plant dries out and dies. Plant at a depth so the crown is not buried and the roots are not exposed. This is not hard to do, but strawberries are sensitive to this, and it is important to keep that planting healthy. After planting, all flowers should be removed. If the flowers are allowed to remain, the plant will use its energy to mature the fruit on the mother plant rather than produce early runners. Early runners are important so that these runners have time to mature by the time they set fruit buds in the fall. Though plants that are fruit of the year of planting will produce daughter plants, they will produce later in the season and will not be mature enough in the fall to produce a full set of flower buds. You will harvest far more strawberries in the year after planting if you remove the flower stalks than you would harvest from the first 2 years if the flower stalks are not removed. Healthy strawberries can fill in a row quickly after planting. As a matter of fact, the row can become too wide. Strawberries bear best on the edges of the row rather than in the middle. In these photos, we see that the row of strawberries is already too wide by late July. So what do you do? We want to narrow the row to 12 to 18 inches wide. There are different ways to do this, but in this case, a rototiller was used. The flags were used to mark how wide we wanted the bed to be, and then ram the tiller down each side of the row to narrow it. This may be done 2 to 3 times during the year. The strawberries are now established. Care from this point on will be the same for new and established plantings. We'll now go through the care starting in the spring. Strawberries are mulched over winter to prevent damage. The planting needs to be uncovered in the spring at the right time to ensure healthy plants. There are 2 common methods to determine when to uncover strawberries. The first is to peek under the straw and uncover when new growth starts. The second is to use a soil thermometer and uncover the strawberries when the soil temperature reaches 40 degrees at a 2-inch depth. The straw should not be taken completely off, but removed just enough that the new growth can peek through. Leaving the straw in the aisles will allow the mulch to be reapplied over the top of the strawberries if a cold snap threatens. Also, the straw can help protect the fruit so it doesn't sit directly on the soil as it ripens. The straw not only keeps the berries cleaner, but reduces the chances the fruit will rot. And last of all, the straw can keep pickers from getting muddy after a rain. Through the rest of the spring, water is needed, but don't fertilize. Fertilization can lead to soft berries, which are more likely to rot. Damage from frost is something we're concerned about every year. For homeowners, a blanket or sheet placed over the plants when frost is predicted is usually all that is needed. Frost is more likely to occur on calm, clear nights, but the sheet may have to be weighted down if wind is forecast. Commercial growers will often use overhead irrigation as they likely are not able to cover the plants. This can also work for homeowners, but there are cautions. Using overhead irrigation makes a mess as it leaves everything muddy. Also, don't start the irrigation until the temperature approaches freezing, as flooded conditions can be a stress to the plant. This means they may need to get up at night to turn on the irrigation. Lastly, don't turn the irrigation off until the ice is melted in the morning. People tend to turn off the irrigation when the sun comes up. This will likely be too early. The strawberry fruit will not be harmed as long as there is unfrozen water on the berries. The temperature of the berries will stay at 32 degrees in those cases. 28 degrees is the temperature at which the fruit buds are damaged. The temperature at sunrise is likely below 32 degrees. If irrigation is turned off at this point, the water coating the blossoms will freeze and the temperature will drop quickly, resulting in damage. Again, we recommend you use sheets or blankets to protect the plants. By the way, the first photo shows frost damage with the left blossom having been killed by frost and the right one undamaged. The difference was the right blossom was closed during the frost event. Summer care for strawberries is composed of watering, weed control, and renovation. For a small planting, hoeing out the weeds as the plants are becoming established is usually all that is needed. Once the plants canopy over, little weeding is necessary, as most weed seeds will not germinate in shade. You may have to pull a few weeds, but that is not difficult. Larger plantings, or those that are not in good shape, may require more extensive weed control measures. Post, found in high-yield grass killer, Monterey grass getter, and other products, can be applied over the top of the strawberry plants for grass control. It cannot be applied during or within 7 days of harvest. Now let's look at renovation. Renovation is done after fruiting, so often sometime in early June. During renovation, you'll cut off diseased leaves, reduce the width of the row to 10 inches, fertilize, and water. The first step in renovation is to cut off the leaves if they are diseased, as evidenced by spots or blotches on the leaves. If the leaves are healthy, you can skip this step. You can use a mower to remove the leaves. If you use a mower, be sure to set it as high as possible so that the crown is not injured and any new runners are not cut off. Be sure to get rid of the leaves. Do not leave the leaves on site, as they can release disease spores that can reinfect the new leaves as they form. It is fine to compost the leaves that were cut off, but don't put the compost back on the strawberries. Use it in other places. Fertilization is the next step. Fertilize according to soil test, or apply 1 pound of a 10-10-10 fertilizer per 25 feet of row. Next, narrow the row to about 10 inches. If you keep the plants in the middle of the row, be sure to throw some soil on them, as the crown of strawberries lengthens every year. This will often happen naturally as you till, but check to be sure, as you do not want too much of the crown sticking out of the ground. Some growers take out the middle and one side of the row, so the plants that are left are younger. Tilling also works the fertilizer on the edges of the row into the soil. Water the plants after renovation to activate the fertilizer. Plants will have recovered in about 2 weeks. Continue to water as needed through the rest of the growing season. Keep the beds at 12 to 18 inches wide. This will require narrowing the bed a couple of times during the summer. Fall care is vital for a productive strawberry patch, as this is the time that the plant sets flower buds. Fertilize in late August. You can use the same fertilizer and the same rate that is used at renovation. Water as needed, and be sure to control the weeds. The last thing to do is to mulch for winter. Mulching isn't so much to protect the plants from extreme cold, though it does do that, but rather to prevent the freezing and thawing of the soil from heaving the plants out of the ground. Heaving exposes the roots, so the plant dies from lack of water. Replace the planting when production falls off, or every 3 to 4 years. Strawberries are one of the first plants to green up in the spring and one of the last to turn brown in the fall. Deer are often attracted to and feed on strawberries, especially during these times when nothing else is green. So what do you do? This is concrete reinforcing wire used to protect strawberries from deer. Well, that covers our lesson on strawberries. Next, we'll move into the brambles and then to grapes.